Hey guys, it's Nathan. I'm working in my home office, which is awesome now. I've been thinking about these two things, and I'm going to keep looking at my computer screen behind the camera because I kind of wrote a little thing to keep me on task. I just have been having two thoughts. So, in my business, we do digital marketing, website development, and SEO, and paid ads. So recently, someone asked about like, can you put me on the first page of Google? And I was like, well, that's not really how that works. Uh, so it's sort of, right? So like, but not. So it's a fine question, but more so than being able to answer their question, it really showcased that they didn't know how the system worked. And then also recently, so both of these things happened in the last 2 weeks. Someone asked me like a degree planning question, and I responded basically the same way, which was like, well, it's not really how that works. So like, it's a good question, but like, it's not really how that works. So in both cases, I had to ask like follow up questions and sort of answer the question that they wanted to ask, rather than the question that they asked. Like they didn't know how to ask the question that they really needed. Um, and so in both cases, I was sort of confused, and I was confused about their sort of like lack of understanding, like of the information in general. And so I explained to the person asking about Google, like, well, hey, there's like this first page of Google concept is sort of a misnomer, and Google is really a search engine. So what it comes up with is like it's just a list of results, that's wildly variable depending on things like your search term and your location and a bunch of other factors, and some of which can be influenced and some of which kind of can't. And they were like, oh, I was told it was basically like yellow pages, like and then first page, second page, third page. And I was like, no, that's but I can get it. I can get how it's easy to talk about it that way, and it's also sort of like old information, but that's not really how that works. It's the most simplistic version of how it could possibly work. And then also I explained to the college person sort of like how the big three colleges work and how the degree planning works and how to match those three things up. And that person was like, oh, thanks. Well, I didn't know about those schools. And I was like, how can you not know about those schools? So in both cases, I thought like, how is this possible? How is this information that I think is so readily available that I'm very familiar with? How do they not have this information? So, I mean, because like there have been hundreds, if thousands potentially, of digital marketing companies, that have blogs and videos and stuff about how Google actually works. And it's honest information. I mean, there are plenty of companies that have like totally BS information out there, but there are tons of companies who have really good information about it. And I mean, like I learned from some of these places, and have done the work now, and can verify they were being truthful. But there are tons of people chasing like degrees and learning about these communities and talking about schools and the big three schools, that we all chat about, and they're probably now big four or big five that I don't know about. And just like at the same time, there are hundreds or thousands of companies every year who basically like get tricked, into buying some sort of hot air thing from some scammy digital marketing company who does SEO, who isn't transparent about what they do. And the person buying it knows they need like something digital because that's important, but they're basically uneducated, and then they just stay that way. And there are at least hundreds of people who have asked me questions about college stuff where the information is definitely available in forums and other stuff like that, like not just my information and my content. So I was like, why is this way? Why, like, how does this happen? And I've been thinking about it. And I basically have come up with two sort of hypotheses. So two theories about how some of this, how does this get this way? And that's a question I like to think about a lot. Like, how did this get this way? I like to answer that question pretty consistently, or pose that question and think about it. So the first thing that I came up with was I really came up with two things. And The first one is a lack of desire or a feeling of need to become educated. And then the second one was a lot of old information becomes new again. And so let me break down the first one. So a lack of desire or feeling of need to become educated. So what that means is like, I think this is primarily because you don't know what you don't know. Which is, right? I remember the first time I heard someone say that and I'm like, oh. But what that also means is that it's hard for you to know what you should know. So like you don't know what information is important enough to learn. So until something happens in your life that makes it obvious that it's important to know something, you basically won't learn it because you have to know that the information exists at all. Then you have to have some reason to know more about it. And then you have to be willing to put in the effort to become knowledgeable about it. And so like for example, my 4-year-old doesn't know that it's important for her to know what a calorie is. Well, I think it's important for her to know what a calorie is. And in fact, she doesn't even know that calories exist. Like, I mean, I'm sure that I've said the word around her, but like, pfft. And let alone how they work or why it would be important for her to know anything about them. And I'll probably explain to her that what a calorie is and how they work and how they affect us and stuff. Way before she would ever encounter the ideas on her own. And who knows if she'll ever decide, or if she ever would have decided that it was important enough to learn about on her own. So it's easy to think that business owners who like don't get the basics of how SEO or digital marketing works are sort of like behind. Or that the people who have questions about college like should know more about some of the questions they ask. Or when they get into the idea of college education or education in general. But I think one of the realities is that these people don't even know that information is important until they started asking about it in the first place. So it feels like, why are you asking these dumb questions? But it's like, well, these are their first questions. They just discovered that it was important to know about this stuff at all. And so good on them for asking at all. Like maybe they feel like they're bad questions, but like, oh my God, thank goodness that they're asking it all now. Like they've now discovered that this is something that they feel like is important to learn. So good job. As opposed to feeling like, hey, what are you guys doing? Feel more like, good job. You have now decided this is information that's relevant for you to become educated about. So it's really easy to get frustrated by what you can feel like is ignorance. But it's important to have grace and remember that like they didn't know, and that's okay. They didn't know it was important to know. So it's not like they were necessarily just being purposefully ignorant. And there's a lot of information everywhere about everything. So how can you possibly decide what you should be learning? Oh my gosh. And the second thought is that old information becomes new again. So we learn a lot of things that are not new. And humans always start at 0% information. Like we start at 0. We're born, we have no information. And then we get information, hopefully good, relevant information that's like siphoned down from sources above us, right? People deciding what's important for us to know. So I've actually often said over my now years as a parent that one of my most important jobs as a parent educating my child is not what to teach my kids. It is what not to teach my kids. Because like we have finite time and attention spans. And so we have to pick what information we're going to absorb. So it's almost more important for me to like constrain what information goes in rather than teaching them everything there is to know and wanting to know everything. It's actually almost more important to know like what not to know, what's not important. And as a parent, how to siphon information usefully for my kids. But what that means is that information that might be something everyone knew, so like something that happened in pop culture where you know, like if somebody asked about it, you'd be like, oh, everybody knows that, Game of Thrones, and like in current culture. But like in 3 or 5 or 10 years, maybe like nobody will know about that anymore because it's not important. It's not important to know. But then something might happen where that thing becomes relevant again. And now we all sort of have to like start over learning about all this information all over again. So even though it's old information, it becomes relevant again. And so even though there are thousands of people who have talked about college and degrees and the big three test-friendly universities, and CLEPs and DSST tests and all of this stuff. And there are thousands of agencies who have talked about like Google and SEO and how that all works and all the digital stuff you can do or should do or whatever. There are still people who don't know at all. And they don't even know that it's important to know or whether it's important to know. And they haven't ever known. And they're just starting their journey of going like, hey, wait, maybe this is important for me to know. And now all of that is information that even though thousands of people talked about and it's sort of like done, now it's all relevant again. And it makes sense to talk about again. Like not just to constantly refer back, but to like make new content and new explanations. And so there's just a lot of old information that's now relevant again. So anyway, just tackling these two concepts, that old information becomes new again, sort of like all the time. And that a lot of people don't know what they don't know. So I think this sort of plays into the college thing. And that's kind of functionally what college is most of the time. Learning, sort of relearning old information, potentially in a new way. But anyway, so just, I guess, keeping on theme. So that's what I was thinking about today. Anyway, I hope this was helpful in some way. All right, thanks.